Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And welcome, everyone. Welcome those that are new. Welcome if you're struggling. Welcome if you couldn't unmute. I am glad you are here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a deep dive into the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're starting from the very, very beginning. In fact, where we're diving in, it doesn't even have a page number. We're going to be diving in right to the title page. I was able to do that because my book is falling apart. Now, there's that old saying, if your book's falling apart, hopefully your life isn't, and that's been my experience. So let us dive right in to the title page. And so it kicks off with Alcoholics Anonymous. And literally, I've read 2 words and we're already going to go on a tangent. Shock. But what I want to point out, and I'm going to reiterate this again and again and again, but the title of this book is Alcoholics Anonymous. Now we're going to jokingly and lovingly and colloquially refer to it as the big book. But the title of the book is Alcoholics Anonymous. And as we dive in, we're going to see why that is important. Now that took all my willpower to leave a bit of a cliffhanger and not spoil it right at the very beginning. So please stick around because that took a lot of willpower. All right, so it goes on to say the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Now, I have a replica copy of the first edition of I don't have an original because that is out of my budget, but I got a replica copy of the first edition. Now, when the first edition went out to the world, it said the story of how more than 100 men have recovered from alcoholism. So what I want to point something out is whenever in this book we see men and women, what we are talking about is an incredibly hopeful and inclusive statement. There was 80 dudes and like 1 gal. And we're like, and women. Do you know what I mean? So that is a hopeful and inclusive statement. And as we go through this book, we're going to be talking about the first 100 members. And I'll always go 80 because it was closer to 80 than it was 100. But what I want to point out is we are talking about the experience of 180 members. Not a theory, not an idea, not an opinion, but the experience of 80 alcoholics who have recovered from alcoholism. And what is important about that is the more of us who go through this book and the more of us who follow the directions as they are outlined in this book, the more of us that are included in the we. The more of us who have the experience that the first 180 that they had, those 80 dudes and 1 gal, Florence, my girl. But Marty Mann gets the credit because anywho, I won't go into the Sylvia Kaufman, Marty Mann, who was first. Doesn't matter. We had some gals that got sober. Women, we can recover too. Amazing. All right. And then it goes on to say how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. We are not even on a page that has a letter or a number. And what we have experienced is the first promise in Alcoholics Anonymous, that we can recover from alcoholism. Yeah, I know, Corinna, you got the pink. Get it out for pink for promises. I don't care what color you highlight things in. Do whatever you want. That is not something I'm mandating. But some people highlight promises in pink. So if you're doing that, rock and roll. But if you have heard the word recovered in and around the rooms and you're like, ooh, that doesn't sit right with me. I don't feel comfortable with that. What do you mean recovered? I know from my own experience that I am never cured of alcoholism. What are we talking about when we use the word recovered? Well, recovered does not mean cured. What recovered means is the obsession of the mind is gone. So bear with me with this. If you are brand new to Alcoholics Anonymous, brand new to this big book study, when we talk about the obsession of the mind is the thought that I have when I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated. And it is a thought that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll just go out for 3 drinks. My problem was drinking with all those Canadians, but we're over in the UK, across the pond. There's no drunks here. It's a thought that says, man, I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? And that thought is gone. And how do we get to that place? Because I can't get to that place by wishing, by hoping, even by trying to will it away. That state of recovered comes as the result of the 12 steps. I take the course of action of the 12 steps. And as a result, the thought to drink leaves. Now, I am always going to be an alcoholic. I am not cured of alcoholism. But you see, there will never be a time because of the allergy of the body that I can ever safely drink again. I can never, ever drink again. And that is because of the allergy of the body. And just as true as that is the truth that I can never, ever not be fully engaged in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as a way of life. Because that obsession of the mind will always come back if I do not treat it with the spiritual awakening. But that is what we're after. We're after recovered. That is available to each and every one of us. And now, let's go have a look at that symbol. Have just one moment, because if you're in North America, you're like, girl, what a nincompoop. What symbol? There's nothing here. What are you talking about? Well, if you're in the UK, you're like, what are these North American nincompoops talking about? Well, this is my UK copy. Thank you, Paul. And it's got this little AA logo. And so you guys in the UK, you're like, oh, I got that. Yeah, I got that in my book. The North Americans are like, what? Why don't I have that? Well, the truth of the matter is Alcoholics Anonymous is phenomenal at giving alcoholics a solution to their alcoholism. We are amazing at sobering up drugs, but we're not so great at copyright law. I'm just kidding. Technically, to defend a copyright, you would have to sue. And if we were to sue people who were using symbols that were similar to the circle and the triangle, well, that would get us well out of the bounds of our primary purpose and well out of the bounds of our 12 traditions. So for those that do not have, us North Americans, who do not have the symbol, what I will do is I will share the screen and we're able to see it. And so this is the symbol that was found before we lost the copyright, and is found in books in the United Kingdom. And what we see is a circle. And that circle represents the wholeness of recovery, a whole recovery. And at the bottom, we see recovery. On one side, we see service, and on the other, we see unity. And so what does that mean? What is the significance? Why is she bothering to screen share? Well, to be fair, I was given the power, and so I want to use it. Let me use that screen share. Pew, pew, pew. Ooh, I wonder if I can do screen share and fireworks at the same time. Probably not. I'm not going to try. I will focus. So when we talk about recovery, what does that mean? What is recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous? And if you're writing in your book or you want to make a note, the program of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous is the 12 steps. That is what we are talking about. The 12 steps. And you'll notice that is the base of our triangle. And so if I do not have all 12 steps rocking and rolling in my life, if I'm not living these steps as a way of life, what that means is I've got no foundation. Sometimes we hear steps 1, 2, 3. That's our foundation. That's not my experience. My experience is that my foundation for life is all 12 steps. And if I don't have all 12 steps active in my life, I've got no base. I've got no foundation. And if I have no base, I have no foundation. What that means is there is no ground. And if there is no ground, man, I am in free fall and I will drink again. That's what that means. So first and foremost, I got to get my 12 steps, the 12 steps, not mine, because if it's mine, I'm going to do some edits because I don't like all of them. But the 12 steps is as directed out of this book. I've got to get that moving in my life as a way of life, all 12 steps. And one of the things that if you keep coming, I hope you do, because I'm so glad you're here. But if you keep coming, you're going to be sick of hearing me saying this. It does not take long to get well. It does not take long to be in a place where we have recovered. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening. It does not take long to feel better and to experience the freedom, the real freedom that is available to each and every one of us. So that is our base, and that is our program. That is recovery, the 12 steps. And then we've got, on the right, we've got service. And service is showing up to be of service. And a very, very special thank you to Rob, to Peppa, to our whole service team, those of you who are letting people in, those of you who are greeting, those of you who I just gave co-host to because you didn't mind, those of you who did the reading, thank you. That is service. And when we look at service, we can look at that as the 12 concepts or the 12 warranties. Now, what we also see on the left-hand side is unity. Now, unity is going to meetings. Unity is the parking lot, whether it's the virtual parking lot or you go out. Do you guys have Denny's? I should know this by now. I should know if you guys have a Denny's, but no, some of you don't got Denny's. It's okay. You know that the cheap breakfast food diner where the menus are sticky and you're allowed to stay as late as you want and drink coffee till 3 a.m. and chit chat about life, recovery, and God. You know what I mean? Like, woo! Like that is unity. And I had this experience. This is really early in the Big Book study to be talking about this. Whoa! So at 18 months into my sobriety, I know it's a little heavy. At 18 months into my sobriety, I very suddenly developed a neurological condition. And that neurological condition left me in the use of a wheelchair. It also meant that I had to learn how to read again. And I always make the joke, what that means is I had to learn how to say anonymity in front of all of y'all twice, which I don't need no sympathy, but I would like a gold star, because, I mean, come on. And if you're just learning anonymity, that'll help. No worries. And nobody knows how to say it when we get here. But I had terrible nausea, like just horrific symptoms. And I experienced a real low point in my life. And then God, higher power, creator, showed up for me in the way that God often does, or higher power, creator, the spirit of the universe often does, with an alcoholic who has an opportunity for me. And it was a dear, dear friend of mine. And she said, Paige, would you want to do Steel on Steel? And Steel on Steel was something that was developed by a well-known AA member, Mark Houston. Not that we got celebrities, but man, he was an amazing member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he created this thing called Steel on Steel. And what we would do is we would meet together once a month and we would share honestly about the struggles that we had living a spiritual way of life. And we would have 10 minutes to share specifically on where we were in our lives. Now, there was a question and answer form. And in that question and answer form, where it started was, are you proportionally involved in these 3 areas? Recovery, unity, and service. I would ask, how is your morning prayer, your morning meditation, your evening review? Are you praying the 9-step prayers? Have you made all of your amends? Are you sponsoring others? Do you have a sponsor? I would ask about service. Are you involved in your home group? Are you involved in other areas of service? Are you of service outside of AA? And then I would ask, what about unity? Are you connecting with other people? Or how many meetings are you attending? But then it would break into all other areas of our life, relationships, work, family, health, like all these areas of our life, and doing Steel on Steel for a number of years off and on. And man, that is what kick started my sobriety to a level that I never before experienced. And it's not that Steel on Steel is anything magical. Steel on Steel provided the accountability to work the 12 steps in the way that the 12 steps demand to be worked for an alcoholic of my type, to take the steps with the seriousness that they require. But what I noticed would happen to myself and the people that I would do Steel on Steel with is that if we were proportionally involved in all three sides of the triangle. There weren't a lot of problems in any other areas of our life. And let me tell you, if those were out of whack, it is wild how often these other areas would also be out of whack. And it told me the value of putting this first, and everything else will be, as the old expression goes, first class. And if I focus on this, everything else does work out. So when I am proportional, when I am equally involved, it is an equilateral triangle. Although I have been told a couple times I am a bit obtuse, which is rude because nobody tells me I'm a cutie. Cute. That's my triangle joke. Please keep coming back to the Big Book Study. Isosceles need you. I don't know. I'm like this. Anywho, but if I am proportionally involved, I will experience that unity, that wholeness, that circle. So that is a whole lot to talk about, something that had very few words on it. That's how this study goes. All right. So what we're going to do is let's just pop over to the contents page. It's a quick flip the page. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here, so don't stress out about it too much. But what I want to point out is we see the contents of the book go from the preface to the forewords. And then we see the doctor's opinion. Then we go into what is often known as the first 164 pages of the book. But then there's a second whole part to this book. We're not going to break down all the table of contents. All I'm just going to say is the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the book that we are reading, has two parts. And we are going to see why those two parts are important. So let's flip it and let's go to the preface. Now, I had a sponsee one time who said, Paige, it is called Preface, to which I assured her it is absolutely not called Preface. I'm just kidding. If you want to call it Preface, you can. If you want to call it Preface, you can. I don't care what you call me. Just call me for dinner. Why am I like this? So, Preface. And so this is going to be that is so cool, Rob. He put the authors in the chat. Oh, if you're coming, you have a look at what Rob does in the chat. It is the coolest thing. Thank you, Rob. So, preface. It says, this is the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So again, what I want to emphasize is the book is called Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the title of this book. And what that means is that this is the 4th edition, and there were 3 previous editions. That's just what that means. Each edition is going to have a foreword, and we're going to read them as we go through this study. It says the first edition appeared in April 1939. And in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. Now, if you're writing in your book and you're making notes, what I would like you to do is make a little note of that 300,000 copies. Because when we get to the forward to the 2nd edition, we're going to come back to this. And I won't say we, but I will say I will do the math. We're going to do some math. You guys don't have to do math. There's no algebra. There's no calculus. But I will do the math. And we're going to see why that number is significant. So 300,000 copies went into circulation. The 2nd edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The 3rd edition, which came off the press in 1976, achieved a circulation of approximately 19.5-ish million in all formats. And I want you to know that, for well over a decade, 15 years, I've been working with sponsees. I've facilitated big book studies. I go through this all the time. I still haven't learned how to say that number correctly. It's 19.5-ish million, and that's how it is. Got a little ish, which, if you're wondering, that's how I budget. It's based on vibes. Oh, that is so interesting. In the UK Big Book, it says 11.7 million. So if you're looking at your Big Book and you're rocking and rolling across the pond, or we're across the pond, but pond adjacent, and you're like, that number's different. That's okay. That's okay. We're the weirdos over in North America, Oh, we don't have the circle and the triangle. What do we got? All right. So it says, And actually, before I dive into the next paragraph, what I want to talk about is we see the growth just based on the number of books that went out to the world, from 300,000 to 1 million to 19 million. Man, that is some growth. And what I will point out is that indicates something about this book. Maybe two things. One, alcoholics, we get drunk and lose things. I'm just kidding. But what I really want to emphasize is that it works. Because we are not buying from 1939 to 1976, and then from 2001 on, we are not buying things that do not work. This is a book written in the 1930s. Most people are not, well, I know I'm a weirdo. I love old books. I get them to be read to me by the computer, but that's how I like to do it, I think that's fun. But most people aren't like, I have burnt my life to the ground with alcoholism. I've lost my job. I've lost my family. I've lost my dignity. I'm in tremendous pain. I don't know how I'm going to make it another day sober, let alone another week. I'm just going to pick up some casual reading from the 1930s. We're not doing that. So why is this book selling? Why is this book being produced? Why are we studying it today? Because it works. Because the directions contained in this book, it works. It works. And it says, because this book has become the basic text for our society. So you can make a little note of basic text. Now, what that means is it is a textbook. Now, some of you in high school were not spending a whole lot of time with textbooks. Some of you were in the smoke pit just smoking and gossiping. No judgment. We didn't have a smoke pit when I was, no, we kind of did. We did. And then it got changed and you had to smoke off campus. Anywho, so some of us were smoking and not like, ooh, a textbook? Oh, I knew this was going to be boring. Lame. And actually my sponsor, he kind of says a little tongue in cheek where it's like, well, if you're not finding it interesting, it is a textbook. But here's my experience. Of course, a textbook is meant to be studied. And I'm meant to learn from it and grow from it. But, imagine, let's say this was not Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's say this was Chemistry 101. And what would I do? Well, what I could do with that chemistry textbook, of course, there's going to be information that I need to glean. But there are experiments that I get to run. And what I can do is I can take the directions in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I can run it as an experiment. And you know what is incredible about that suggestion? Is the experiment doesn't care about my attitude. The experiment does not care about my motives. It does not matter. So now this would not be a high school experiment. This is when we were doing in like kindergarten. But but this is how my brain is working today. If you were to take vinegar and baking soda, it does not matter if you are like, oh, I don't like this and I don't think it's going to have a reaction attitude, right? What will happen? You will still get the result. Yes, there will be a result, and it is tangible and it is palpable and you can see it just like you can in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it can be a little explosive because we get rocketed into that fourth dimension. You know what I mean? Put that vinegar into the baking soda, right? And so that is how I can approach this thing. I don't have to be like, oh man, I gotta study. No, yes, we can study this and that's what we're gonna do, but more important than just studying it, more important than figuring out how you say 19.5-ish million, more important than that is having the experience. And that's what we're after, to have the experience. But not just so we have it. I'm after this experience so that I can help other people have the experience. So that's why we're going through this book. So, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women, again, when it was, and women, very hopeful, very inclusive, because it was like 80 white dudes, and women, But it says, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. And so what we will see is that we don't want to make a lot of changes. There's going to be a point we're going to see where we did make a lot of changes in the book, but spoilers, I'm just going to spoil it. Yeah, I'll read it and then I'll spoil it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth editions. So, I don't know about you, but anyone here, when you came to Alcoholics Anonymous, now we hadn't gotten a sponsor, we hadn't done a step, we haven't even had a whiff of the steps, but we had a look at the steps on the wall and how the thing was going to get run, and we're like, I know how we can do this a whole lot better. Let me get my paws in there. Let me change it up. Anyone? Cool. Just me. Cool. Look at you guys showing up so humble, not wanting to change things. But no, we got to do this and we got to do this. By the way, no idea if any of my changes would possibly work because I haven't done anything, but I want to change it. Now, as alcoholics, I'm not saying this is diagnostic of alcoholism, but I'll just say it's a little bit of a criteria. Don't we want to get our little paws in there and switch it up and do some stuff, right? And this is where we're like, no, we don't want to make any changes. But here's why. Because it works. Because it has helped such large numbers of alcoholics to recovery. That is why we don't want to change it. What we have in the directions of how to get well is a way that works, a way that is replicable, and we know that it works again and again and again. I put vinegar into the baking soda. I know it's become a stupid little reference, but we're stuck with it because that's how my brain works. And every single time I get a reaction. I follow the directions, the 12 steps is laid out in this book, and every single time I get a spiritual awakening. That is why we don't change it, because it works, and it works in a way that is replicable. And I also want to point out the AA recovery program. What is the program in Alcoholics Anonymous? The meetings aren't the program. The meetings are the unity and the fellowship and where we come to hang out and talk about the program and support each other in the program. But what is the program? The program in Alcoholics Anonymous is the 12 steps as outlined in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the program. Now, if you're here today and you're like, I've been doing the fellowship, I don't have a sponsor, I'm scared of the steps. Again, what I want to emphasize is it doesn't take long to get well. And that our job, our responsibility, I say job, it's an avocation. We advocate. I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But our responsibility to you is to help you. We will take your hand and we will walk with you through the path that is outlined in this book. You don't have to do it alone. And just as important, you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to get well. We can get well very quickly here. So the 12 steps. That's the program. So it has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth editions. The section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor. And so if you've been around a little while, you're probably like, oh, the doctor's opinion. But if you're brand new, you're like, who cares what a doctor thinks? I mean, that was my opinion, ooh, do I get a fun little script? What are we doing, But the doctor's opinion, it contains vital step one information that really helps us to see what alcoholism is. So what we are seeing is what has not changed. The diagnosis for alcoholism and the program of recovery to get well. Because from 1939 until today, alcoholism has not changed. And the process of recovery still works. Okay, so that has not changed. So what has changed? Well, the 12th tradition added the appendices. Or the second edition added the appendices. The 12 traditions and the directions for getting in touch with AA. So as the fellowship grew, we're like, girl, we need some spiritual principles so we can get along. Maybe your group consciences go a little bit nicer than mine, but we needed some principles to keep us in line. We needed a way for people to get in touch with us. But it says, it says the second edition added the appendices, the 12 traditions, and the directions for getting in touch with AA. But the chief change, the main change, was in the section of personal stories. So what has changed? The stories. The stories have changed. And why were they changed? It says, which was expanded to reflect the fellowship's growth. Because keep in mind, in 1939, we had 80 white dudes, middle-aged white dudes. And I don't know about you, but when I got here, I was looking for all the ways I didn't fit, all the ways I didn't belong, all the ways I wasn't like you. And I'm not a middle-aged white dude. You know what I mean? I'm not like you. But as the fellowship grew and we got more than one woman, we got women actually, we included their stories. And as we got people who joined us and began to recover from different ages, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, cultures, we wanted to include their stories too, because if you're like me, I needed to see myself in these rooms. And I need to see recovery was possible for me. So it goes on to say, Bill's story, Dr. Bob's nightmare, and one other personal history from the first edition were retained intact. We kept those ones because those ones seemed important. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to read this pretty quickly. I'm going to do a little bit of speed reading. So if you're like, whoa, I can't keep up. Yeah, we're going a little fast. I'll slow it down at a point or two. But so It goes on to say, three were edited. One of these was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written with new titles. 30 completely new stories were added, and the story section was divided into 3 parts under the same headings that are used now. In the 3rd edition, Part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 of the stories in Part 2, They Stopped in Time, were carried over from the 2nd edition. 8 new stories were added. In Part 3, they lost nearly all 8 stories were retained, and 5 new ones were added. Now, I could keep going with that real quick, but I want to pause for a moment and point out the titles for the 3 sections. So they have Pioneers of AA, because they wanted to keep some of these original stories of what happened with Dr. Bob? What happened with Bill Wilson? What happened to AA number 3? What about my homie, Fitz Mayo? He's my guy. I love him. Right? We wanted to keep their stories. But then we have stories where it says they stopped in time. And those are the stories for what? For somebody like me, when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I think I'm not as bad as you. And then it says they lost nearly all. And those are stories for the people who come here and think, man, I am way worse than you. And those stories are meant to attack the denial and my separateness, and I'm not like you, and I don't fit in, and I'm different. And the whole point of this book, was in one piece of literature that we could carry the AA message. You see, when this book went out to the world, there was 2, maybe 3 in Cleveland. So Akron, New York, maybe Cleveland, 3 groups at most in the world. And I would get a copy of this book and not know a single other sober alcoholic. And what I would do is I would read this book alone, and I would follow the directions, and I would recover. And so the stories in the back of the book are doing exactly what we are called to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, to help people identify and to help people recover. And that's why the stories are there. And that's why the stories have changed. So we are going to rock and roll, and I'm going to go back to reading very quickly. It says, the 4th edition includes the 12 concepts for world service and revises the 3 sections of personal stories as follows. 1 new story has been added to Part 1, and 2 that originally appeared in Part 3 have been repositioned there. 6 of the stories have been deleted. 6 of the stories in Part 2 have been carried over. 11 new ones have been added, and 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 new stories. 8 were removed in addition to the 2 that were transferred to Part 1. I just read that quickly because I've only ever once had anyone be like, hey, what was one of the stories that were transferred to part one? Only once has anyone ever asked. And if you're curious, that's a Rob question. It's what that is. That is for Rob, and he will answer. So basically, as the fellowship grew, we added the 12 concepts, principles, so the world services, alcohol as a whole could continue to survive and function in a way that is worldwide and is effective. But again, we had to change the stories because more and more of us were getting well, more of us were experiencing recovery, more and more of us were being able to carry this message. So we had to switch it up. So it says, all of the changes made over the years in the big book, AA members' fond nickname for this volume, it is a nickname, it is not the name, have had the same purpose. So summarizing why we have changed the stories. It says to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately and thereby to reach more alcoholics. If you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe that this program can work for me too. Rob, and if you are on the edge of your seat, which stories were moved around? Rob's got you. It's in the chat. Now, I'll just take a moment and see who goes and has a look. I'm just kidding. All right. So let's dive in forward to the first edition. And so this is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. So when the first edition went out to the world, this was the foreword that was contained within it. Now that first paragraph of the foreword to the first edition, which may be all that we have time for this week, but the first paragraph of the foreword to the first edition is a beautiful description of what Alcoholics Anonymous is. It carries a lot of vital information, and I have attended groups where instead of reading the preamble, this is what was read at the start of the meeting. So it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous, and to speak about that we, again, originally the we was the first 180 members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but the more of us who follow the directions as outlined in this book, I truly believe the more of us that are included in the we. And of course, we're talking about their experience, but isn't it wild how I take this course of action and my experience lines up with exactly what is promised? You know what I'm saying? So the more of us that can be included in the we. So it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women. It was 80 dudes, but close enough, men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And if you're working, and don't do this if you're driving, don't try to highlight or underline anything. If you're driving, you just drive, you be safe. But if you are tucked in bed, hanging out on the chair, couch, sofa, cushion, whatever, glad you're here, you can make a little note, recovered. We're going to see that word again and again and again, recovered. Because that is the hope that is available in Alcoholics Anonymous, that we can be recovered. And it says, who have recovered from a seemingly, and this is another word I want us to emphasize, hopeless state of mind and body. That hopelessness. Because if you're like me, it is only when I am able to see the reality of my predicament, only when I am able to see the hopelessness of my alcoholism, that I am going to grab a hold of the hope that is on offer. So a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And right where it says body, we can make a note if you're writing in your book. You don't have to. Sometimes I joke, I hear it's what all the cool kids are doing, but I'm just kidding. If you're here today, you're a cool kid, and I love you. I have been known to use childhood peer pressure to get people to put notes in their books, I hear that boys won't like you if you don't do your 4-step. You get that inventory done, or there's going to be a rumor on the playground that you eat your boogers. Yep, I was asked to do the big book study again. Again, they invited me, which really tells you more about the one day at a time group than it does about me. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Whoa, well, these guys. All right. So when it says seemingly hopeless state of body, what I want us to do is I want us to make a note that that is the physical allergy. That is the allergy of the body and what that looks like. If you've not heard this term before, you're not sure what that term means. The allergy of the body is what happens as soon as I take a drink. So I physically ingest the alcohol. And I'll just tell you what it looks like for me. I ingest the alcohol and it looks at first a little like, you guys know what I'm saying? Oh, it is ease. It is comfort. Man, it is everything that I was looking for. My skin fits for the first time. I am comfortably numb. I am okay. But you see, I take that drink and this is what the allergy is. I get that effect, even if only for a moment. And it's like a little switch that goes off in the back of my mind and it tells me more. And the more that I drink, the more that I need to drink. You know what I mean? Like I take a drink and I get thirstier. Like I take a drink and I need more. You see, I take a drink and it demands a second. And that second insists on 4. And that 4th drink will not relent until I've had 8. And the 8th drink is screaming at me until I've had 16. And so on and so forth. And so that is the allergy of the body that once I start, I do not know if I will be able to stop. That is the allergy of the body. Now, when it talks about that seemingly hopeless state of mind, you can make a little note, if you want, in your book that that is the mental obsession. And the mental obsession, it only happens when I am sober. The obsession of the mind happens when I am sober. And it is a thought that I have when I am sober that takes me back to the first drink. And it is a thought, like I said, this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I just got to get it out of my system. I'm being a real jerk to everybody in my life. If I take a drink or two, I'll take the edge off and it'll be nicer to everyone. It looks like I'm going to kill myself anyway so I get drunk. It looks like if you were going through what I was going through, you would have to get drunk too. F you, F this, F that, I'm getting drunk. It looks like a thought that is on me all day. Take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink. Until what little willpower and what little defense I'm able to muster is eroded away and I'm drinking again. But it also looks like a case of the suddenlies. I'm out there living my life. I don't want to drink, I don't want to drink, I don't want to drink, and I have a drink in my hand and I do not know how it happened. And the allergy of the body means that I cannot drink. But the obsession of the mind means that I will drink again. That is what makes this illness hopeless. I need to not drink, but I cannot stay sober. And that's that hopelessness that we're talking about. And that we can recover. The obsession of the mind can be relieved from us, and it is relieved of us through this course of action. And it goes on to say, to show other alcoholics precisely, and I want to emphasize precisely, how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Again, recovered, we see that word again. It does not mean cured. It means that the obsession of the mind is gone as the result of this course of action. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So the main point of this whole book is to tell people like us how we can get well and stay well, which is why we are going to study it line by line. But also I will point out that this is in italics. Now, italics means emphasis. It's meant to stand out. Now, there's a myth, and it was a myth that I would say again and again because I heard it and it made sense. The myth was that in the 1930s, italics cost extra. And there was a time in history where italics did cost extra. They were more expensive. But by the time the 1930s had rolled around, we were rocking and rolling, printing press, old news, we figured it out. So italics, it didn't cost more. But when we look at some of the myths that we hear in Alcoholics Anonymous, I always want to ask, why might they persist? And so the myth and how I would tell it that italics cost more money was, man, we had about 80 drunks. Yes, and as Paul says, it was in capitals in the first edition. It's big and bold. We had 80 drunks that had very little money, and they agreed to spend money on this. And that story tells us how important italics are. Was it true? No. But from that is the gleaming, the lesson of the importance of the italics. And it says, so the whole point of this book is to tell us how to recover. That's why we're studying it. That's why we go through it. That's why this book is important. It says, for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. So what we're hoping is that as we go through this book, that each and every one of us will be like, what? Has somebody been reading my diary? What? Like, I gotta draw my blinds. Like, what? How did you know? You put an Apple eye tracker or whatever it is on me? Like, how did you know? That's what we're hoping. We're hoping that we're gonna read this thing and be called out. And don't worry, I see the time. I'm gonna land the plane at the end of this paragraph. So it says, we think this account of our experience, again, this is a book based on experience. It's not based on ideas or theories. This is what we have done. So we think this account of our experience will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And I want to emphasize sick. Sick maybe has a bit of a different connotation in 2025. Ill, a person that is operating from pain. I am somebody who is up against an illness over which I could not have any power. You are not bad. You are not evil. You are not broken, but you are up against, if you have alcoholism, you are up against an illness over which you could not possibly have any power. And it says, and besides, we are sure, now this is what I want us to emphasize as well, that our way of living, these 12 steps are not a thing that I do once. They are how we live our lives. It is how I live my life, not just in between the prayers of the meeting. I mean, outside of the prayers of the meeting. These 12 steps I bring into all areas of our life. This is a way of life. I am never done. So it says, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. And that, because we only have 3 minutes left, is where I will stop and kick it over to Peppa. So thank you for the opportunity to do this.